We'll call the meeting of the City of San Angelo Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone Board to order. And just to kind of make a statement, at the beginning, we have a quorum. We take public comment on every item on the agenda. If you are here to speak to an item that is on the agenda, please wait until that item is called, and then you'll be given an opportunity to make public comment at that time. I know there are some people here that are likely here to talk about the nonprofit issue, which is going to be, that will actually be an item discussed under the board education discussion today. So if you're here to speak about that, you will have an opportunity to speak at that time. If there's not a specific item on the agenda that you're here to speak to, then now's the time to come forward and address the board if you wish. I don't see anyone else. All right, so we'll go on. First item on the agenda is second item on the agenda, number 2, consideration of approving the minutes from the June 25th, 2024 TIRZ Board meeting. You should have all received a copy of those minutes in the email noticing for this meeting. Are there any changes or corrections to the minute as reviewed? No changes or corrections. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? So moved by Mr. Gaylor. Second by Ms. Spears. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries. I will sign the minutes. Those aside. All right. Next item on the agenda, number 3, is the board education discussion. So, educate us and enlighten us.
Well, thank you, Chairman Hogue and board. We're here to just talk a few things more about our TIRZ program and where it's come from and where it's going. My name is Aaron Vanoy, Director of Planning and Development Services. Let's see here. So I did break down, currently I've gone through all of our private projects, our private incentive projects. So these are business owners and that we've given them, if you will, grants over time. Obviously our TIRZ program began in 2009. We started with 2 grants that year of just $7,500 to 2 different recipients. And then over the next few years, from 2009 to 2015, as the TIRZ funding started to grow, we did 34 total grants for $304,000. And I've got a breakout of a graph that shows what that kind of looks like. And then you can really see that it started really growing after 2015. And then we've done 97 grants during that time frame of almost $4.5 million. So here's that combined total. You can see starting off in 2019, for some reason there in 2013, we had a dip in applications and money that was awarded. This is a combined of the North and the South. They kind of had, while the funds weren't combined, their recording of items was combined. And so that's how we have this combined information here. And you can see 2014, 2015 start going up. Then here on the, starting in 2016, they started recording things separately. While they were still separate, North and South, they started recording them separately. And so you really see here the North, there's a couple of peaks, and we're kind of on a high end again after the COVID situation in 2020 as we're starting to recover. You can see we've really done quite a bit in private incentives on the North in 2023. We've had a number of applications come in. And then on the South, I thought it would be more of a gradual line, but it kind of bounced up and down as well between 2016 and 2022. You can see where they finished off fairly strong. And of course, the South has not always had as high of valuations as the North has. And so looking at that, that's our private incentives. What my next step to do is to bring back information of what have we done on the public side? What have we done? Is it, the South Chadburn item or other things? What have we, as a TIRZ board, recommended for awarding on the public side? And so I'll be bringing that back in the next time we meet. So I also did an evaluation of the policy evolution. So our policies have kind of evolved over time. And I specifically looked at where did we stand at that time with nonprofits, particularly north, south, whatever it says. So in 2009, there was a policy for the downtown and there was a policy for the north. The south or the downtown policy did not specify nonprofits are or are not eligible. It didn't say that wording in there at all. It was just not there. Now, the north at that time, it specifically excluded nonprofits and churches. It said nonprofits and churches for eligibility. The next policy change that I saw that was a major impact is in 2015 is when they actually combined the South and the North policy back into kind of one policy for everyone. And specifically, they were focusing on new business, large impact areas, and the central area. At that time, it did not mention anything about North, South on the nonprofits. In 2017, we had another policy update that, again, it was recommended to separate North from South. The North specifically allowed nonprofits at this time, but excluded single-family residential, or actually really any RS zoning, not just single-family, but RS1, RS2, or RS3 zoning. And then the South at that time in 2017 specifically excluded nonprofits and RS districts in the South as far as being eligible to apply for funding. So this, again, kind of reinforced from 2015 to 2017, okay, we don't want nonprofits in the South to apply or be eligible for funding, but we think it's okay in the North. And then again in 2022, we decided to combine those policies for South and North. It all depends on our makeup of whether we like to split things or combine things. We combine them again. The North Zone, it had specific language in there that nonprofits were allowed with a favorable vote of 3/4 of all members of the TIRZ and council. And again, all RS zone properties were excluded. And so with that being combined, it specifically said the North could have those, the South that they were excluded. And then 2023 was our last policy update adopted by City Council, and essentially the same as 2022 for nonprofits in RS zone districts. It simply just kind of added the ADA emphasis as a high priority with award rankings. And so last time we talked about, well, what does that mean for our nonprofits? So far, I have found that, and when I say the word awarded, this board made the recommendation to award. That does not mean they were funded, and I'll clarify that even further. So you see in 2015, the San Angelo Dream Center was somewhere at 1928 MLK, which that's on their application. I'm not able to actually find that address on our street of MLK, so I'm not exactly sure where it was. They were requested funding for transitional housing. They went through the board. They were favorable by this board, went to City Council. They got all the way through to a letter to proceed, which is the last step to actually start their project, and they withdrew the project. So they never actually got funded.
But they were approved by the City Council.
But they were approved by the City Council in the North. 2017, the San Angelo Area Foundation, and that should be it's a number sign, but it should be a dollar sign for $37,000 for a pocket park located at South Oaks and Tuig. It was in the South District. It actually did come before this board, and at that time we actually had a new planning director that came on right after that. They recognized that that was a exclusion that they're not allowed to apply for, and then they rejected the application before it ever went to city council to reject that to formally reject that application. That the nonprofit, the San Angelo Area Foundation, was not eligible to apply. So that's where I say neither project utilized funding from TIRZ. While the north one did get approved at city council, they never actually went through with the project, so they didn't get funding. And of course, the one in the south TIRZ did not move forward as it was excluded at that time. So what does that mean for us? So looking at all of our going back and forth on nonprofits, at some point back in 2015, I should say, let's see, man, I want to make sure I'm saying this right. 2015, the North was allowed to have nonprofits apply for funding, where the South was excluded. So I don't know in 2015 if that was an interpretation because it really didn't mention anything, and that's how, sorry about that. This application from the San Angelo Dream Center was allowed to move forward, but it was allowed to move forward. It was received the update or the go-ahead from City Council. So, part of my task was to, is there a recommendation from city staff of how we should handle nonprofits? So for right now, our policies are south, nonprofits are no, north, nonprofits are yes. My opinion is, and my research is, if we've decided approximately a decade ago that nonprofits are eligible, I think we should move forward with nonprofits being eligible. Y'all have the ability on every project to decide if there is a cap on that project. Our rules can apply to everyone, saying, okay, well, you could be eligible up to $75,000, but it's y'all's recommendation of, well, we were only going to fund that at $10,000 or $50,000 or whatever the case may be. And then it does go to city council with your recommendation. Now, that doesn't mean city council will fund it, but I think we've only had one that we've moved forward. City council said no. I think if that's y'all's desire, if you see a project that comes across through an application, city staff has brought that to you with a recommendation. If y'all are favorable with the 3/4 vote, then we take that to city council and say, this is our stance on this project for this nonprofit. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions on this section. Again, I'm going to bring back the public information the next time.
Okay. I mean, I do have some questions, and I'm sure other board members do as well. Does anybody have anything they want to ask or clarify with Aaron before we ask for public comment, though?
Who's in charge of policy changes? Is it council?
Council has final say on policy changes. They typically originate whether with staff or this group. They talk about it, they get the language, then it goes forward to city council for their final vote.
Obviously, the prices have gone up, but is there a reason, do you think, for the number that was awarded back from 2009, 2015 is because of what was available? Or, can you was there any correlation between what was available to what was spent then versus what is available now and what is being spent?
A lot of it did start out those first few years was what was available. Then there was very specific criteria that people had to meet to be in a certain type of business class, restaurant and things like that. There were certain types of egress grants that were available, trying to get secondary egress. And of course, building safety was critical because at that time we had a number of vacant buildings, and part of it was they were having a difficult time meeting, whether it's building codes, fire codes, things like that. So that was kind of the focus at that time. But looking at 2009, we had 2 projects. 2010, we had 5 projects. And so if you think about 5 projects between $13,000, that's not a whole lot of money to do a whole lot of stuff. No. The next year in 2011, we had 7 projects. Now we had $58,000 there. In 2012, we had 8 projects, but it dropped down to $51,000. Again, $51,000 for 8 projects in a building, as we know, in today's cost, that doesn't do a lot for you. Yeah. That may pay for your asbestos survey, but not abating it, if that. Then it dropped down to only three applications in 2013, 2 applications in 2014, and then back up to 7 applications. So it seemed to be, part of it I think is a funding component, looking at what was the dollars available, but the second item is how many people actually applied.
Yeah. Yeah, because I just did a quick math on those first, like from '09 to '15, it was only an average of like $8,000 per project versus from '15 to 2023, it was about $46,000. So
Yeah.
you had a big.
And so for an example, the egress project, the secondary egress project, it was capped at $5,000 in the incentive grants. And so they capped them at $5,000. And so if they were looking for that, that's all they could get for that type of project.
Gotcha. Okay. And then also one last question, and then I'll be done. With the cultural district being proposed and talked about in the south of the river here, will those with like short-term rentals, stuff like that, will those be zoned RS, or what will those be zoned? I mean, I see that we're exempt from RS, so just curious if any of those, if we need to spur any of that along, is that something that we need to look at, how those will be zoned?
That's a great question. I don't think that's been determined fully yet of what I know right now, most of the area that is residential is RS2. But I think that's for discussion. And whether that's discussion here to remove the RS or to allow it past single-family residential, I do need to make sure that I go back and look at the state rules to make sure that because there's a certain part of our makeup can only make up residential.
Sure.
And when they made the district, I want to make sure that if it is specifically for RS, that it actually could go towards that. So I need to do some research on that, but I also think that's a consideration for the zoning side of it, of do we look at that zoning for those areas? Does that allow a RM1 zoning that still allows a single-family home, or it allows short-term rental, but it would be eligible under the policies that we have currently?
Okay, so I do think if that's a direction that the city wants to go, that I think we could be a benefit in helping on that.
Other questions from the board?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. I have 2 questions. The numbers that you've given, does that include the public dollars as well? That's
No, ma'am.
just for projects?
That is just private incentives right now.
Okay.
I will bring that number back with the charts and everything for the next group as
Okay.
well.
All right, and then did this information include any nonprofit giving? Since 2009, did we give to any nonprofit? Did I miss that?
Well, it looks like there was 2 that this board recommended funding for. The one in 2015 to the San Angelo Dream Center.
Oh, that's a nonprofit?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
That one did get approval at city council, but they did not actually get funding because they pulled the project. They didn't do the project.
okay,
The next one, it did come to this board and get discussed and get recommended for funding, but before it went to city council, it was stopped because it was recognized that it was in the South TIRZ district and it was not eligible to receive funding at all. And so it was pulled and rejected in July 2017.
so in essence, we've never given to a nonprofit since 2009?
We have not actually spent funds on a nonprofit since, it
Ever.
really doesn't look like ever,
According to this, we haven't spent any
Yeah.
funds for nonprofits
other
ever.
other than a government or public entity.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? I would like to open it up for questions from the public or comments from the public about this topic. I think what we're trying to do is educate ourselves on this history and address the issue with nonprofits that we've been dealing with for a while. But if anyone has any public comment or question they would like to direct to the board or to staff, please come forward. Mr. Myers?
You don't claim to be an expert on anything unless nobody else was alive when you were. I'm the oldest person here. And I think Bob Salas from Neighborhood Development, Neighborhood Services, and I are the only 2 people that have been actively involved in not only the beginning of TIRZ as a citizen participation and a city staff, but the whole aspect of neighborhood revitalization in the community. And there's a context here that's never accurately been dealt with. And I'm going to go back a little bit when you said you want a little history. In 2004, there was a new mayor elected who was very young and a little more progressive than those who'd gone before. And a city council came into power at that same time that had more representation of folks than the traditional San Angelo City Council had, which were all people from kind of the same backgrounds and the same economic situations. And the city designated 4 target areas as blighted slums. And they were Blackshear, Reagan, Fort Concho, and Rio Vista. And they were all either almost totally minority or they were mixed but mostly minority. And as we dealt over the years with neighborhood revitalization and went down to the state and lobbied for projects, for tax credit projects that had been really denied here or not even allowed by the city council, we found that we were engaged in something that no other city in Texas had done. And that is to identify blighted areas and target them, not to gentrify them or to bulldoze them and let somebody else come in and develop them, but to redevelop those communities, not removing any of the citizens. And that had never been done, and there certainly wasn't enough money to do it. But a coalition of folks gathered that had never come together, that was informal, made up of the city staff at that time that was very, very, very progressive, and had, with the new city manager, who was the first Mexican-American city manager in San Angelo, looked at those blighted areas and said, we haven't done anything ever except to repress their moving out. Segregation in Blackshear was almost total. 90% of all the people who lived in San Angelo who were black lived in that area, and they were not welcome to move out for quite a while. And some things happened that caused the city to want to change that. And the first was neighborhood revitalization. And the coalition had 2 primary units to it. One was the city, and they gave their staff over to it. They weren't going to fund very much of anything, but they gave their staff over to planning and mobilization and guiding, finding resources other than the city operating budget. The other was a community organization that was seen as communistically organized and led. That was called San Angelo WTOS, West Texas Organizing Strategy, which was a coalition of churches and not-for-profits that were designed specifically to partner with the city to make this happen. And they did, and we operated at WTOS. I was pastor of St. Paul Presbyterian Church for 23 years, retired for a little while, and then was at St. Mark until retirement. And what we did was we started out to gather information, and the city never bothered to gather. They went with ASUs looking at the statistics from the census and made decisions about people's lives. We canvassed 5,000 households and did a survey on each of them about what kind of housing they had and what the needs were. We found out, and I know you're watching your watch, but this has never been really addressed here because the neighborhood revitalization was an overlap with TIRZ, and they went 2 different directions. And this group, which had all the not-for-profits that dealt with housing and neighborhood repairs like Christmas in April and then keeping San Angelo beautiful and those kinds of things, and the city, and then the WTOS mobilized the citizens as a volunteer source that did probably 20,000 hours in volunteer efforts in rehabbing houses, cleaning out vacant lots. And the city did some things that they never did. Their code compliance people actually went in, never done it before, and started cleaning up the vacant areas up there, which allowed for development. And when they dealt with the trash, there were vacant areas. There were 50 houses in Blackshear alone that had been condemned but never removed. They were used as crack houses and people who were itinerant that would come in, and they were fire hazards. There were dozens of lots that the city owned that they never cleaned up. They got by tax abatement. And so the deal is that this was really slum. And all of those together, bottom line, when we finished up, because there was a coalition of all the not-for-profits, we got private business, we got banks, we got the city, the tax credits from developers, put $40 million in residential and apartment complexes. That's pretty big if you look at city budgets and think, $40 million. And with rehabbing houses and new houses that the private sector came in where they'd never ever developed houses before. At this point, over $120 million had been put on the ground in the course of about 18 years. And that was, as we went down and found when we lobbied at state for tax credit programs, no other city in the state of Texas had ever got rid of a slum. They gentrified them. They got somebody that got a grant and put in a project in there that in 10 years was a part of the slum because the area around them didn't do anything. But they put that much money in, and by 2013, they were no longer designated slum areas. Where 70% of the housing had been substandard, it was developed down to 15%. And now it's done even more because the last statistics we had were 2018. The bottom line is, we went into residential neighborhood redevelopment and redeveloped. Going to TIRZ, and I was engaged with the beginning of TIRZ, often on the other side of what the TIRZ Board wanted, because the initial TIRZ Board was made up of all people who lived on the north side, the northwest side of town, and people who had business interests downtown. And while the northern TIRZ section has 75% even today of all the population that is served along the MLK corridor are either non-white or poor or low income. And so the efforts that were put in with a model of what works downtown. Downtown people did a great job. Downtown San Angelo, subsidized by the city, in conjunction with the chamber, which represents all the business interests of the downtown kind of folks, and all the other kind of folks, came up with wonderful planning. The city, came in and provided staffing for it, and they did wonderful things. Our downtown is something to be proud of, and TIRZ provided a lot of the seed money, and then the efforts of the city to find matching funds for all these, but they did a fantastic job. On the north side, they put in the same model. They said, the business people up there on the north side, they've got to come together the same way the south side did. Marginal people who own mom and pop shops, a few major industries who don't have the area, as a part of their business plan, like Hirschfield Steel and Palmer Seeds and, these kinds of things, had no interest in particularly developing the area. And myself and one other person walked every business on the north side, MLK, Chadbourne, and Bryant, trying to, get together some folks. And we'd get together maybe 20 businesses. And they didn't have the clout. They didn't have the kind of planning expertise that the folks down in downtown did. And so things would kind of come up and then they'd go. Because the Texas Bank had the building on 19th Street, the first thing they did was beautify the streetscape on either side of 19th Street there on Chadbourne. But when things would come up on the north and somebody'd come up, how about $50,000 for a frontage? with a building that has a vacant area on one side and a single-family dwelling that nobody's living in on the other side, the model that worked downtown didn't work up here. And so the restrictions and the decisions about how you invest your money up there, because the other thing you need to understand, and you're dealing with it, there's always been a problem that the people on the north side have all the money, but they can't do anything with it. And the people downtown don't have enough money to do all the things they're quite capable of doing. And they do things like when they wanted to finish out North Chadbourn, which was in the south side up to the bypass, well, we don't have the money. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll go and change the boundaries of TIRZ so that the north side boundaries is 3 blocks south of the bypass, and so there we can, get north side money to go in to fix up something that's an extension of downtown. Makes sense, and they've got the money and they're not using it. What I would like to suggest is that as you look at not-for-profit, it's not a political thing, that I don't believe that not-for-profits who don't pay taxes ought to get any tax benefits. Well, that may make sense in a situation where not-for-profits are very large freestanding entities, and they really don't need a few $1,000s here or there for a facade. And the businesses are, investors who come in from the outside and start a restaurant or something, great, that's fantastic, San Angelo needs it. But that resource is not available on the north side. Not-for-profits, and I know there's one gentleman, I don't see him here now, but he was just adamant that, churches, should not be seen as a not-for-profit that could receive anything, that they just shouldn't, because there's a philosophical, religious, political kind of feeling. But when you have an area that, a good portion of the major buildings that are anchors, on a long street, that's an avenue from up there to back down there, are not-for-profits, are churches. And, they have something to offer. That doesn't make sense maybe downtown, but it's unique, the situation on the north side. And I want to say just this one thing. The model that the north side used for its residential redevelopment and the other 3 blighted areas was successful in a way that hasn't been done anywhere else, because they started from the bottom up and they mobilized the people, and then they got the resources and the planning help and the other kinds of things to make things work. And it's the most successful thing in the state of Texas, if you want to talk about redevelopment. The North Side TIRZ program has been singularly unsuccessful. And I think when you think about what you do with not-for-profits, you ought to understand, oh, by the way, the reason the North Side has all the money is because the people who did the planning and starting up of TIRZ overlooked one thing. While downtown is 90%, well, I was 60% perhaps, made up of not-for-profits and governmental properties, the north side, not because they're brilliant, but because the people in Walmart put up the new great big 15-block Walmart kind of building and generated more taxes than TIRZ altogether and the rest of it makes. And so the north side wound up with all this money, but they don't have the planning help. And there's one last thing. If you want to look at the south side, I don't remember how many years ago it was because, I'm old, really old. But the city of San Angelo put together a blue ribbon planning group made up of the best business people around, bankers, consultants from ASU, people from the base, to decide on a plan, a business plan for downtown, what they could do, what they needed, what were the things that were available, how they could advertise it to generate business for downtown. And they had the Chamber of Commerce, they had the Country Club, they had the City of San Angelo staffing it, they had specialists who came in from other places, resources, and they came up with a plan. Nobody has ever given the resource needed most on the north side, and that is a plan that is sensitive to who they are that would allow them to increase. And if you're going to do something that relates to the north side, it has got to have some kind of recognition that not-for-profits are to the north side what business is to the south side in a long way. And that's never been dealt with. But I think the thing to look at is, so it hadn't been successful on the north side for all these years. But the neighborhood revitalization, which led with a totally different model, has been the best in the state. And I think, that might just say there's some places to look for information that might be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Myers. Any other public comment on this issue? Come on up, Evelyn.
Good afternoon, everyone. I agree with everything he said. I had some other stuff to add on, but I don't want to take up more of your time. But I just want to encourage the TIRZ Board to continue doing what you're doing for nonprofit organizations. You guys have put a lot of time and effort into doing this, and some of you know at my church, Gethsemane, we put in an application. When they told us, yeah, you put in an application, nonprofits are eligible. And they turned us down like 5 different times. You guys approved it and went over there and they turned us down for reasons I really don't know, except for we don't bring in any taxes, which they knew in the first place when we put in an application. So I just want to continue to support you and ask you to don't give up all your time and effort that you already put into this. My church has put their application, it's been over a year now, and we're still working on this. So I appreciate each and every one of your effort, and please continue to do so and support the nonprofits in this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. This is mostly an education session, this topic. We do not have an agenda item to actually take action on anything related to the nonprofits. I think the thing, and just going back to the history of it, particularly the most recent one with the Gethsemane Church, we recommended it, took it to council. I spoke to council on its behalf. The sense that I got from the current council was that they were not, the majority of the council was okay with it. There were a few, I think a couple of members who were opposed to it, and one of the concerns that they had was they were afraid, kind of going to what you said, Craig, is that once we opened the door and granted this to one nonprofit, because there's so many nonprofits on MLK and churches and things, that it would open the floodgates, and all these people, all these nonprofits would be coming asking for money. Proposals have been put out about if you would create a policy where there was a cap on how much money you would give either to all nonprofits in a year, or that might be something that council might go along with. Of course, as we all know, councils change, every few years. And so, what happens with this one may not happen with the next one. I would like to see us continue to try to address the nonprofit issue and find a way to do that if the board is interested in doing that. One option is we can just leave it as is, or we can ask staff to come back with some recommendations of options. Particularly one of the things I had thought about was giving a percentage cap to the amount of money. For example, we have X amount of dollars that we spend typically in the north zone. We could set aside a percentage of that amount to be for nonprofits or things like that. Or you could put a dollar cap on, as you were mentioning, Aaron, that was the first time I'd ever thought about it, was if this board wanted to put as part of its policy just that, that nonprofits were eligible up to X amount of dollars or things of that nature. I do think that there's a way we can get this done, but I know we've spent a lot of time on it, and maybe the board's not really all that interested in continuing to try to pursue it. So I guess I'll open that up for board comment. Yes, Shirley?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I do think we need to continue to keep focus, as Ms. Smith has indicated, on this issue. I can see how maybe putting a limit or a cap on the percentages or the amount could maybe help us move it through council, but I'm not even sure. So I don't know, Mr. Van Oy, if it's something that we need to ask the staff to go back and research, because the issue, in my mind, is from this board to the council. And so whether you all go back as staff and come back with recommendations, again, the issue could still be whether or not we approve something based on these new ideas, and the city council still refuses to accept our recommendation. I think that, again, we need to keep the focus on the nonprofits, and I think what we need to do is perhaps ensure that our council people have also received this information, the statistics that you provided there, Mr. Van Noy, that it's always been, or has for a long time, not always, but for a long time, nonprofits have been in there. To your point, Mr. Hogue, we have had changes in our council leadership, and we're going to continue to have changes. Every time, there's every few years, we're going to have changes. So I think we need to continue on this focus, but I think there needs to be, whether it's individually or what, this council that we currently have in place, because this has been an issue for over a year. And Reverend Myers, thank you very much for all of that history that you provided. It just kind of helped to clarify some things. I've heard bits and pieces through the years that I've lived here, but that really did help to clarify some things. I just think we need to stay focused on it, and I would like if staff could provide us this presentation, Mr. Van Oy, that you provided today. And I know we can't do anything unless it's at the council meeting, but I think we need to request time on the agenda with the council to actually review this information that you provided. And perhaps what staff can do is to get some additional information like what Reverend Myers presented for historical context.
Anyone else?
I don't think that there's anybody on this board. I know we've had some new board members that have come on since this originally started, but I don't know of anybody that's completely against having nonprofits on here that I know of. But I think our big disconnect is with city council, and I think we have asked that we get direction from city council on what they want us to do, and are they not responding back? Are they asking that it needs to come from here? Because we've spent a lot of time going back and forth on this, and to me, we need to get it resolved at city council level, what they're comfortable with, so that we can basically do what we do, and that is take applications, approve or disapprove projects, and send to them. But we have spent a lot of time going back and forth, and I think we're all on the same page with this, that we're okay with nonprofits. We just need direction for what they want from us so that we can continue to do what we're here and appointed to do.
And that's why I think it needs to be on the agenda. It doesn't need to be
What you're
spaced.
talking about is a joint meeting, essentially.
Yes, it doesn't need to be public comment where they don't have to respond or react.
Yeah.
It needs to be an agenda item that all the council persons and the mayor and the city manager, that we can discuss it and have conversation and debate about it. But if it's not on there for them to respond to, it doesn't matter. I don't think it just needs to,
Well, then,
we need to allow for public comment. It needs to be an
I think
agenda
the
item.
most effective way to accomplish that, Shirley,
I'm
would
sorry.
be, I think the most effective way to accomplish what you're talking about, which is something I've been considering for a while, is passing a motion from this board asking for a meeting with the city council on that issue.
I think that'd save a lot of time, because like I said, we've spent many of times in this meeting going over this same topic, and I don't think any of this board has changed. I mean, like I said, I could be wrong, but I don't think our thought has changed. We just have to have direct from the city on what they're gonna approve or what they're willing to approve, so we can move on with what we do.
I would support that.
You want to
Mr.
make that
Chairman,
in
I
the
would
form of
support
motion?
having a joint discussion with council.
Can you make that a motion?
Sure. I'd like to make a motion that the TIRZ Board and the City Council, Mayor and City Manager have a joint meeting to discuss specifically nonprofit TIRZ application and approval process.
Is there a second?
Can I just add to that too, while we got on there, and
Okay.
clarification on public projects, on direction for public projects?
Like the government-based?
Correct, like like we did on, they basically overturned us and took, and it's fine, like I said, we just need, if that's something that we can do too on the public projects for as far as improvement, neighborhood improvements.
Okay, you mind to amend your motion to make that?
I will amend the motion
Okay.
accordingly.
And
Thank
you're
you.
seconding the amended motion? Okay. Is there any?
Would that be open to the public?
Yes, it would be at a city council meeting. It would have to be a posted joint city council TIRZ Board meeting. Open to the public.
Oh, we need to vote. I'm sorry. I'll wait to the vote.
Is there any public comment on that motion? All right, is there any further discussion among the board on that motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries. So if we can just have that in the minutes, that we're making that formal request to the council to have a meeting. Now, I will clarify for the board, the council can reject our motion and not meet about it, but we would
Yes.
very strongly urge the council to put us on their agenda in the near future.
Yes. And I
The
will
emphasis
also,
on near.
yes, ma'am. And I will also come back, I think I'll go back and review the last 3 years of what we had for allocations or how much we could give away in the north and break that down into what a percentage would look like, maybe a 10, 20, and 30%, so that you have those numbers. Then I will do just a dollar cap. What would that impact be? And then if there was just a number cap of applicants. So if we said, okay, only 4 applicants could apply that are nonprofit per year out of
Or,
that area.
and all, I don't know if this is what you're talking about too, but also I think, one idea mentioned was a cap per nonprofit project. Yeah, per applicant, as opposed to a gross number.
Okay, so I'll
Mr.
bring
Wise,
some.
you wanted to say something?
As they work to schedule it, keep in mind, they'll get you all on as quick as they can, but they're in full throttle budget hearings right now, so they're meeting extra a lot of times. So they'll work to get y'all in as quick as they can, but just know they're in that right now, so it may be a little bit.
I understand.
One of the things that we might want to consider as well, because I know that that's one of the conversations that I've heard, is that, nonprofits, because they have access to grants and they have access to tithes and other ways to earn money that is not, taxed, that they have other avenues to raise that money. And maybe that is an option too, is if your church, whatever you're capable of providing, maybe even have a consideration where we meet that amount. If this is your budget for this project that comes out of your church, we can meet that, and that's kind of maybe even an option as well.
Well, yeah, and I think, the other side of that argument is private businesses have other access to access to the revenue too. But I do think where we redress that is if in whatever policy we have, we do have matching requirements. And can have matching requirements in there for those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So things like that can be done to address those kind of issues.
Well, and I think that, again, some of the concerns that I've heard is that, when you have a nonprofit that might bring in $5,000 a year and they're asking for, and this is being kind of extreme, and it's not an exact situation, it's just a generalization, but you have a nonprofit who maybe brings in $5,000 a year asking for $75,000, that might not align too. So having some sort of some
sort of
goalposts and
guidelines.
keep it in between there would probably be
Yep.
a good option, a
Those
good
are all
compromise
good-
too.
Those are all good ideas.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to
Yes.
just, again, for the record, to make sure that when staff goes back to do what they're going to do and pull additional information and so forth, I don't know how many people are left. I know when I first arrived here 10 years ago, WTOS was still something that was there were a handful of people doing things, but I think that piece of it is critical for the city to be reminded and or made aware, because there are a couple of people who have joined the council since, we'll say 2015, that might benefit from the information, and there should be documents and documentation, such as what Reverend Myers spoke on today, that the city should be able to have access to make sure that it's not just a one-sided discussion and that it's not just the TIRZ Board trying to do things, but that let's look at what historically has been done that has helped the north side and the south side be a comfortable place to live and play and work. And I think that's an important piece of it.
Yes, ma'am.
With that, we'll move on to the next item on the, Evelyn, you want to say something?
Other grants that are available out there for nonprofits, that they have a requirement that your grant is specifically for something, like you want to open up a Sunday school, and you want to do a vacation Bible school, it's not beautifying the area
Yep.
or the outside as opposed to.
Yep, I understand. Move on to the next item on the agenda is finished project update. Hannah, you were going to guide us through that again?
Yes, how are y'all doing?
All right.
Okay, short and simple, this one. Let's see, so we're gonna start with 641 South Chadburn, and as you can see, they did a lot of facade work. These are looking very good. I'll show you the next one, and you'll see the comparison of them. They're side by side, obviously, you can probably, I don't know if this has a little pointer, but you can see on the side that they're right next to each other. Yeah, basically just did the same thing. These were done by Monday Shorts and Baja Properties. And then here's an aerial of it, and that blue little square. I wasn't sure where these were when I first started, so that's why I included this, because it is a different location. So it's by East Avenue B, and then obviously on South Chadburn.
Okay.
And then we'll have 402 West Beauregard. Y'all have all
Oh, yeah.
probably seen this one. This one is amazing, looks awesome. They redid the parking lot and added that pool. And then 1718 North Bryant, which is Waltz Auto. They
Okay.
just redid the whole facade as well as the parking lot. And then we have 416 South Oaks, which if you guys remember, it was on my last presentation with the incomplete projects, but they are complete and they are looking good. They redid the sidewalk, redid really the curbing and everything. And then here's the other side of it as well. And these two are right by each other. Before and after pictures, before on the left, after on the right. And then that's all I have for y'all.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions about any of those? If not, we'll move on to,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, ma'am.
I did have a question, and I'm not trying to bring you out, but did we discuss making sure that we're getting copies of this type information in our packets before the meeting so that we can kind of look at it and even those that are on the table to be considered?
Yes, so
Okay.
we were a little, I was a little behind on the PowerPoint, which was mean to get y'all out to, or get that out to y'all, but I do have a note that I will send this PowerPoint over to y'all at the end of
Okay.
the presentation, just because I didn't get it to y'all today. So.
Okay, thank you.
The next item is consideration and possible, number 5, consideration and possible action of the following property tax rebate request at 109 South Chadburn.
And city staff's going to request to pull that item.
Okay.
This is a project that y'all did fund this year. They have not started the project. And so we're still calculating what's that tax rebate would be. And it really is a rebate that starts after they've finished their project. And so we're just wanting to make sure that we have some pretty accurate numbers, because they probably won't get finished until 2026. And we just want to make sure that we're projecting the right numbers so that they don't have to come back and ask for
Okay.
a tax rebate again.
So we're pulling that one. We're not going to take that up today.
That's our request, yes.
Okay. Any objection from any of the board? All right, we'll just consider that one pulled. Number 6, director's report. Anything else you want to say to us, Mr. Vinoy?
Yes. Hannah is working on getting a meeting with the Small Business Development Center as well as downtown San Angelo to do some application training. so that we're going to be doing that in August, getting prepped for our potential allocation in October and opening up a cycle for applicants. Of course, the north side is always open for applicants, but we understand that those two agencies help applicants a lot fill out those forms. And the better they fill out the forms, the quicker it is that we can get them turned around, brought here to this board to make some recommendations. So we're going to do some training with them. The other item I had, and this kind of goes into what y'all's discussion has been today, is we're really coming up on our, what I would call our last 10 years. In 2036, if there's no action by council, this TIRZ district will sunset. And I'm wondering if there's any thought process or any desire to do some kind of a 10-year plan for our TIRZ board of this is where we really want to see the rest of this TIRZ move towards. Obviously, we're going to have private incentives come in every year, but I would like us to maybe strategize about, we've got a decade left, and how do we want that to maybe finish out, or is there a recommendation down the road that we need to extend it?
I would like to have that discussion. I think that's probably a discussion that's going to take place over a longer period of time. But I would like to be able to get the the feelings of the board and the public, and also to talk to staff about, of course, it's 10 years sounds like that's so far in the future, it's never going to get here, but it'll be here tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I would be interested in having the discussion of what do we do, what is the plan for when we get to the end of that 10-year period? And is there a plan to renew it? Does the city want a plan to renew it? Does the city want to create another tier somewhere else to focus on another part of town? What is the end game? But I would like to have some kind of plan or targeted goals that we would like to achieve in that 10 years as well. So, those are my thoughts. Anyone else? Looking at you, Rick.
I think that is a good suggestion. Also, there has been some talk of some individuals looking at whether or not you would like to reevaluate the current boundaries of that. So that may be a discussion you have.
Yeah, I think over the next 10 years, those are all discussions that we and the city need to have.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to think ahead of how we focus some of our things. Obviously, we have our basic program, our incentive program, and then as we see big projects like we saw this spring or early summer about this big sidewalk project that's going to come through, well, that impacts us all the way through until about 4 years left of our program. And so we have to start thinking about those impacts. What are we going to do as we move forward in the next few years? Those have lasting impacts.
Yep.
But that's all I have, Chairman.
Okay. Does anyone have any other future agenda items they would like to be put on their next agenda for which our meeting is scheduled for August the 27th? You've been very quiet over there, Mr. Brown.
We haven't had to discuss concrete or landscaping or interest rates.
Yeah, I understand. All right. I don't hear any other than the items that we've already talked about in the meeting. So is there a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn by Mr. Gaylor. Is there a second? Second, Mr. Benson. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And we are adjourned. Thank you.